Hello and happy 2024 to all of my fellow indie warriors. I'm Barely Magic Mike and I'm here to usher in 2024 with a continuation of our list of greatest indie games of all time. If you haven't caught up on the titles that made the list so far, feel free to check out the description below to check them out, as many of them are still part of Steam's winter sale as of the time of this video. And as always, if you like what you see and want to keep supporting independent content free of the influences of gaming media's echo chambers, give us a visit on Patreon and gain access to exclusive live streams, our wonderful Discord community, and very much more. Now, let's get started on an especially wholesome note with Wandersong. Despite it being generally well-reviewed and well-regarded among the indie game community, I still can't help but feel Wandersong is underappreciated for how utterly brilliant it is. Beyond looking like a colorful arts and crafts project brought gloriously to life, Wandersong is a puzzle, platforming, and rhythm game hybrid that tells a story with a lot of heart. You play as a bard who seeks to become a hero, but upon realizing he's too weak to pick up a sword, decides to save the world through song. As far as premises go, it's far more than a gimmick, too. The world around you is constantly reacting to the notes you sing, making everything feel vibrant and alive. And while the game's vibe and cast of characters could easily make do as merely one of the most charming games I've ever played, its gameplay is no slouch, offering wonderful platforming sequences and a stellar variety of mechanics that burst with imagination. If you've slept on this one these past several years, I'll forgive you, but highly recommend you give it a go. Continuing our unintentionally musical theme so far is Everhood, a game so deliberately insane that it feels like the bastard love child of Undertale, Guitar Hero, and a hell of a lot of psychedelic drugs. While the overworld of the game takes on the form of a retro RPG similar to Undertale, I personally found the battle system a lot more my style, as each enemy encounter takes the form of a series of notes to dodge that get more and more wild as the game goes on. This is a journey that is in no way afraid to throw the unexpected at you, and saying any more about that would do it a disservice. But while the challenge level is high, the stellar gameplay, great story, fantastic music, and trippy visuals coalesce into an absolutely unmissable experience. Alright, rhythm game haters, you can breathe a sigh of relief as we move on to something completely different in the form of a horror platformer, sort of. The Upturned is a really difficult game to describe despite only having just recently finished it myself, but in doing so, it quickly skyrocketed itself to one of my favorite indies of all time. This little known but phenomenal gem comes to us from developer Zeekers, a name that's likely to have the same effect as the WALK word does to my dogs for fans of the recent indie smash hit Lethal Company. Yes, that developer made games before Lethal Company, and to skip this one would be doing yourself a tremendous disservice. The Upturned takes place at the Upturned Inn, a bizarre hotel of sorts you've arrived at to check into your luxury suite all the way on floor 1434. Thankfully, there's an elevator to take you up there, albeit one that breaks down on very dangerous floors dozens of times. Each level of the Upturn takes place on one of these floors, and the fact that every single last one of the 30 plus locations in the game presents completely different situations, mechanics, enemies, or environments constantly had me on the edge of my seat and left me deeply eager to stick around and find out whatever weird idea the developer came up with next. And this game is weird. It's a game where every door is opened by ripping it off its hinges and tossing it down the hallway, or where you might stumble upon a gun that shoots couches, or where you might accidentally pick up a magnet that's so powerful it attracts things that aren't even metallic and will send every item in the room hurtling toward you at lightning speed. Frankly, it's better if you don't ask too many questions. Despite some jank that comes with the territory, I found the Upturn to be terrifying, hilarious, weird as hell, and frankly, one of the most confidently creative games I've ever played. There's so much more I could say about it, but we only have so much time. Now, for something quite a bit more well-known, we have Slay the Spire, a game so disgustingly addictive that you'll blink and lose an entire weekend if you're not careful. Slay the Spire is a turn-based deck-building roguelike to end all turn-based deck-building roguelikes, and the sheer level of creativity in its enemies, decks, and characters has, in my humble opinion, been completely unmatched in the nearly 5 years since it released out of early access. While the premise of the game is exceptionally simple, foregoing an overworld or any real story in favor of streamlined battles and a bit of lore scattered throughout its random events, Slay the Spire manages to be one of the only roguelikes I've ever played where each run can truly feel almost completely different, and every single choice down to the new cards chosen in the first few battles feel like they matter. With arguably hundreds of hours of content, an insane mod scene, and a fiendish difficulty that hands your ass to you and has you crawling back begging for more, this is just one of those games where if you're even a tiny bit interested, you should probably already own it. We're gonna get a bit more obscure again for our next pick here, as Patrick's Paradise Parabox is not a puzzle game for everyone, simply for the fact that not every gamer desires to let their brain become fundamentally broken by a puzzle game that's way too smart for its own good. Patrick's Parabox is a block-pushing puzzle game often referred to as a Sokoban puzzler, but like many of its recent ilk, there is very much a catch in the form of the game's recursive puzzles. While all you're trying to do is push blocks into a particular position to solve a level, doing so will often require you to solve levels within levels where you simultaneously exist in all of them at once, or perhaps push a level within a level out of that level to create a paradox of the level and use that to solve the level. You following so far? Of course you are, you're a clever bunch. Patrick's Parabox is without a doubt a puzzle game for puzzle game enthusiasts, and its sometimes extreme difficulty will probably not change your mind if you're not a fan of the genre. But for those who are, this is one of the most clever puzzlers I've certainly ever played, and one that explores its mechanics so thoroughly and so comprehensively that my jaw consistently dropped in awe that this game could ever be created, and the sheer satisfaction of solving its brain-melting enigmas simply cannot go unappreciated. Next up is a game that isn't so much one of the best indies of all time as much as it is one of the single best games I've ever played, period. That game is Disco Elysium, a bizarre experience that blends a murder mystery with the mechanics of a tabletop-style RPG, dice rolls and all, but without any of the combat. That's right, there is no combat system in Disco Elysium, which made the bold decision to focus solely on its wildly branching narrative and ensuring that every skill check decision that you make feels like it matters. And to say it succeeds would be obviously putting it mildly. Disco Elysium succeeds on many fronts, from its bleak, grimy, and occasionally grotesque visual design to its phenomenal voice acting, but above all, the game is known for its writing, because Disco Elysium is not only the single best written game I've ever played, but frankly one of the best written pieces of any kind of media I've ever had the pleasure to experience. Its story has you play as a bumbling drunkard of a detective who, after a particularly nasty bender, doesn't remember his own name, where his badge is, or the fact that he's investigating a murder, and has his various personality traits personified into actual voices in his head that constantly argue with him or between each other, because that's a totally normal thing. Yet it manages to be insightful, tragic, and darkly hilarious at any given moment without the slightest hint of tonal whiplash. There's simply no overstating how immersive all of it is, how well its lore is fleshed out, how wonderfully its characters are developed, and how unbelievably weird it allows itself to be without ever unhooking you from its narrative beats. I won't pretend its writing doesn't come with some occasional pretension, because it absolutely does, but that should not stop anybody from experiencing what is probably the single best RPG of a generation. While it may not seem like it on the surface, discussion of Disco Elysium makes a surprisingly apt transition into our next game, Citizen Sleeper. The games have a number of parallels, both being heavily narrative and choice-driven games without any form of combat, and while Citizen Sleeper's writing chops may not be quite on par with the absolute best of the best, it still does a fantastic job fleshing out its characters and sci-fi world with an impressive number of creative narrative scenarios. Citizen Sleeper has you play as a sleeper, ostensibly an entire human personality stuffed into a body to be sold as cheap labor to your corporate overlords. Your escape brings you to the Eye, a space colony you have the dubious privilege of now calling home, doing odd jobs and befriending a variety of folk who are often just trying to make their way through each day just like you are. Citizen Sleeper's greatest asset is its incredible commitment to immersion. By leaving you to your own devices about what you do each day, who you talk to, and where you go, it felt like I was truly living on the Eye and felt my sleepers' desperation to make a life for themselves away from the prying eyes of corporate greed. As with any game of its type, saying too much would venture deep enough into spoiler territory that it's not worth it, but know that this is one journey you will not soon forget. Video game premises don't get a lot more bizarre than our next pick, Return of the Obra Dinn. In what's possibly a first in the entire history of gaming, you play as an insurance agent, whose job is to investigate what happened to a merchant ship called the Obra Dinn, which made its way back to port years after disappearing under mysterious circumstances in the early 1800s, with all of the crew gone and nothing in the way to explain what happened to them. Well, nothing at least beyond a mysterious pocket watch you have that allows you to glimpse into the past to see and hear the final moments of each of the crew members, conveniently enough. Your job in this game from beginning to end is to fill out a journal where you match each crew member's name to the manifest, determine who killed them and how they died. It may sound straightforward the way I've described it, but Obra Dinn is anything but, requiring you to reference scenes, maps, pictures, identify voices, deduce relationships between members of the crew, and in general feel like as real a detective as a video game can possibly make you. It can be frustrating when you feel like you've hit a dead end, as the game is fairly self-guided and it can be hard to make progress if you're truly stuck. But if you manage to make it through to the grand finale, you'll likely find one of the most satisfying investigative experiences in all of indie gaming. And last but certainly not least for Volume 4 of our list is Baba Is You, a game that I have confidently proclaimed on many occasions the single most intelligent puzzle game I have ever played, so much so that I never even came close to finishing its most brutal challenges. Baba Is You takes Sokoban puzzles to another level by having some of the blocks you push be words that spell out actual rules within the game world. For example, if you're struggling to cross a pit of lava and are able to access 3 blocks that spell out lava is hot, maybe you can swap the word hot with the word win, and now touching the lava allows you to beat the level. Solving all its puzzles requires mental gymnastics played at what feels like an Olympic level at times, but there is nothing whatsoever out there similar to Baba Is You, and it remains one of the most fiendishly difficult but masterfully designed puzzle experiences I have ever played. And that concludes Volume 4 of our greatest indies of all time. I'd like to thank you all once again for supporting independent content that brings a voice to the voiceless, and ask that if you like what you see, please remember to like and subscribe, as well as check out our Patreon at patreon.com/idreamofindiegames. Until next time, Indie Warriors, have a fantastic beginning of 2024, and keep it here on I Dream of Indie Games for more coverage of the indie scene that is near and dear to our hearts.